Well, in Germany, Bible-believing congregations are sometimes seen as dangerous cults. One German pastor told CBN News he's facing the worst persecution in his life. Yet despite constant harassment by police, his dynamic church is growing. Dale Hurd reports from Germany.
Poisoned land, government opposition, and even a police assault against the pastor have not prevented this German church from becoming the largest in the city of Duisburg. The church is called Wera Forum. Vera means belief.
We always say, come to our building, touch it, and listen to the story of how it was built. Then you'll believe.
The pastor, Alexander Epp, himself an ethnic German who returned from the Soviet Union, says he never faced this kind of persecution from the KGB. This is Epp after a German SWAT team last year blew the door off his house and attacked him, breaking his nose. Why the police would do such a thing in a moment. Epp came to Duisburg as a truck mechanic in the 1980s. When the Lord put on his heart to begin an outreach to the Russian-German community here. The church outgrew its old building and finally found land for a new one, except they couldn't get a permit to build a church or get a bank loan, and the soil at the building site was found to be contaminated.
We had an expert assessment done, and the assessment showed that we'd have to invest a lot of money to remove all this soil here.
Instead of giving up, they decided to pray.
And then we stood together with the whole congregation. We held each other's hands, prayed together, God, heal the soil. And then we called in another company. They did an assessment and said the soil is clean, no toxins, nothing.
Unable to obtain a permit for a church, they became a tax-free religious organization. Without a bank loan, they built the structure themselves. Wera Forum and its 4 satellite churches are now attended by more than 1,000 people. Their services are in Russian and German. Sundays are an all-day event, with church members staying to eat a meal together and fellowship. Since only about 5% of Germans attend church, a successful church here can raise suspicions that it's a cult, using psychological pressure, forcing people to attend. Wera Forum's media department even produced a video explaining to Germans that the church is not a cult. Their website states the church leadership is transparent and accountable, and no one is forced to attend. However, last summer, the police used a former attendee's false claim that the pastor possessed an illegal firearm to launch an early morning raid on the church and on his home.
I heard this bang when they blew the door.
80 to 100 masked officers stormed the house, pointing machine guns at him.
I thought they were criminals. When I was beaten and thrown to the ground, I thought they were robbers trying to rob my house. I never thought they were the police.
Because of that, Pastor Epp tried to defend himself, and that's when a police officer punched him in the face, breaking his nose and leaving his right eye with internal bleeding. He was forcibly thrown to the floor, bloody and injured, while the SWAT team ransacked his home.
And then I just shouted, Jesus, help me.
Epp says one of the policemen then answered,
Jesus hilft dir nicht.
Jesus is not going to help you. A machine gun was even pointed at his wife Irina, who would have to be taken to a hospital for medical complications. Epp was then handcuffed and driven to the church, where the SWAT team entered with machine guns drawn, busting down doors and ransacking offices and classrooms. The police took all the church's computers. They apparently found nothing and returned them. Epp was charged with resisting the police. Epp claims the SWAT operation was launched even though the man who said the pastor had a gun admitted to a police officer before the raid that he had lied. The Duisburg police never apologized for the injuries to Pastor Epp or the damage to his home and car, and have never compensated him for his medical expenses. The authorities did not reply to our request for an explanation. Epp's son, Walter.
It seems now like a big project just to intimidate us, because we are maybe the biggest church here in Duisburg and the fastest growing.
Epp, who lived most of his life in the Soviet Union, calls it the worst persecution he's ever experienced. However, God would turn it all for good. News of the police raid has caused even more people to discover the church and start attending. Epp says all of the trouble and obstacles the church has overcome have only increased their faith.
We always had problems, and I kept asking myself, God, why? But I think it was all part of God's plan, that we'd be under pressure and that we wouldn't rely on ourselves, but on Him.
Dale Hurd, CBN News, in Duisburg, Germany.
And that's a lesson for us all as the persecution of Christians is ramping up worldwide. We're seeing it in incredible levels around the world. And it's not just the Middle East, it's not just China, it's not just India. But what you just saw is a state action against a pastor based on false charges. But here they come in with 100 men. It's looking for one firearm. Are you out of your mind? What an incredible thing. And don't think it can't happen here. I remember over 24 showing up at a pro-life protester's house based, again, on this crazy claim. He was represented by a lawyer. His lawyer said he'd be glad to turn his client in. But no, they had to come with a SWAT team with automatic weapons and full show of force in a dawn raid on his home. That is the intimidation that I think will be increasing in the world today. Jesus warned us of this and said it is the beginning of sorrows. And so just like Nate Saint, just like the pastor you just saw in Germany, are we willing to put our lives on the line and in that realize only dependence on God is going to see us through? If you're trusting in other things, be wary, because that which cannot be shaken is the only thing that will survive. What cannot be shaken? The kingdom of God. Who never changes? Jesus. So when you rely on Him, you trust on Him, you're on a very firm foundation.